Lin Ye accidentally clicked on a small advertisement and found it to be an incredibly realistic game, with a sense of touch, smell, and reality without doubt. In the game, disabled legs can stand up, and their previous fighting skills and shooting abilities have come into play. The game god was saved by her, and old players called her Night Sister. In this world, all game experiences have to start over, and Lin Ye, who has not played games before, has an advantage. As Lin Ye gradually adapted to this game, she realized that the world was truly terrifying, not just a game. However, she didn't care. In this world, she could run, jump, and rediscover her excellent self. She just wanted to use her passion to protect this arc base. Keywords of the novel. Sick beauty in the Wasteland world. Super fierce without pop-ups, sick beauty in the Wasteland world. Super fierce TXT complete collection download, sick beauty in the Wasteland world. Super fierce latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Surprisingly, there really is such a game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Surprisingly, there really is such a game. Lin Ye fiddled with the helmet in his hand, with a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Just a few days ago, while browsing news, a game advertisement page suddenly popped up. A poorly crafted and perfunctory advertising website that actually writes 100% realistic simulation of real games. It claims that no matter what one feels, sees, or even touches, they are all the same as the real world. After reading this sentence, Lin Ye almost didn't laugh, which was almost like writing, "I am a fraud," on it. It can be said that only fools are fooled. But she is that fool. I just didn't expect this scammer not to have a verification code, not a bank card, and even sent me this game helmet. In 5 minutes, it will be the start time of the game. If it weren't for this helmet, Lin Ye might have forgotten about it a long time ago, but it was because of this helmet that she hesitated a bit. 100% virtual reality, she instinctively touched her legs that she had not felt for several years. There was an inexplicable expectation in my heart. At exactly 6 o'clock, Lin Ye put on his helmet without hesitation. In an instant of dizziness, the whole person was already lying in a strange environment. I realized that I was no longer in my room and was lying inside a glass cover. I instinctively reached out and touched it up. With a shush sound, the glass cover opened. Lin Ye instinctively sat up and was momentarily taken aback, for the movement of just getting up was incredibly effortless. Subconsciously, she lowered her head to look at herself. She was once a Special Forces soldier, but since she got injured and sat in a wheelchair while rescuing someone, she can no longer remember what it feels like to sit up on her own. At this moment, this feeling is exceptionally clear. An idea suddenly struck my heart, and I slowly lifted my legs, only to find that I could really move. When I truly felt that down-to-earth feeling, I was only shocked and said, how could I really stand up? I can really see and touch. Suddenly, a voice came in. Lin Ye followed the sound and saw a short man jump out of the hibernation pod like her, not even reaching her shoulder from the line of sight. The man, who had not yet woken up from the shock, actually lay down on the ground and sniffed, "There's still a smell." Lin Ye was just shocked by the fact that she could stand here, and had not paid attention to anything else. At this moment, I heard the short man's words and reached out to touch the place where she had just woken up, something similar to the hibernation module of the spacecraft. This tactile sensation made it difficult for her to distinguish whether it was reality or really entering the game. When she was surprised, another cabin door was opened, and people sat up one after another, their faces also showing shock. "Is this really a game?" Lin Ye asked with some disbelief. But everyone else was in shock. Where would anyone answer her words? Being able to see and hear. Another excited person jumped out of the hibernation pod, shouting and jumping. The feeling of controlling the body is almost indistinguishable from the real self. As she spoke, she hugged the pillar next to her and bumped into it, only to hear a sigh. But the pain actually made him even happier, he said, I still have a sense of pain. Watching them so excited, Lin Ye didn't expect them to answer anymore. He walked aside and touched the wall, not only that, but also the taste and touch, all so delicate. How did the game company do it? As far as I know, there is no technology that can achieve it among the publicly available technologies. A big boy walked over and habitually pushed his glasses, only to realize that he didn't even have glasses. Then he laughed and said, look, even the habits in life have been brought here, which shows how mature this technology is. As he spoke, he remembered something and said, I forgot to introduce myself. I am an old monster, usually considered a tech nerd, and my favorite thing is to challenge challenging creative inventions. I thought that the 100% virtual experience and real feelings mentioned in this game were just gimmicks, but I didn't expect. As he spoke, he glanced around and said, even the birthplace of the game is designed to mimic the clone cultivation tank, which is very innovative. It's not just that you think it's a gimmick, I'm just planning to come in and crack down on counterfeits, the short man said with emotion. But I didn't expect that the clown was actually me. Then something came to mind, I called you pressing on my leg hair, you can call me leg hair. Your name. Lin Ye regained consciousness at this moment, almost not laughing at his name. Looking at him again, he couldn't help but ask, why are you so short, dwarf? My leg hair turned black upon hearing this, and I said, how do I know that I can't choose my own character in this game? As he spoke, he looked up at Lin Ye and was suddenly surprised. Brothers, have you forgotten something important? We have beautiful women here. Without waiting for others to speak, his leg stubbornly asked, you're not a human demon, are you? Lin Ye, who was exploring the room in a novel way, heard his voice and walked over directly. He punched him in the head with his height and said, the feeling of hitting someone is really real. Cough. There's no doubt about the human demon. As they laughed and frolicked, the last cabin finally opened and a normal man walked out, even a bit handsome. It seems that the system added the 2 points of beauty reduction to him, right? The man stood up taller than them all, with silver hair and a serious smile on his face. He scanned around and said, isn't this game just a few of us? Yeah, how do 5 people play? What about beginner tutorials and NPCs? With this statement, everyone also calmed down. Look around. Finally, everyone's gaze fell on that door. Wow! Is this a doomsday ship? Before all the doors could be pushed open, I heard the surprised sound of my legs. A chubby green-haired man immediately pushed him and said, let's take a look too. The room door was pushed open, and a space station-like hall appeared in front of them. In the middle stood a young man who could clearly be seen as a dragon, dressed in a captain's uniform, with a cold and aloof face. Is this NPC? Novice village chief, this is too wasteful. Why are NPCs so handsome, but we are so ugly? You are the only one who is ugly, and it's not without handsome beauty. Their chattering voices echoed in Lin Ye's ears, causing her some annoyance. She, who was accustomed to living alone, had not heard so much nonsense in a day for a long time. But at this moment, looking at the hall full of technology, I have to admit that I was also attracted. After seeing them, the captain looked indifferent and slowly raised his hands. My people, welcome back. I am your leader. Noah. And here is your last home. The Ark Base. 100 years ago, zombies occupied our city, and our resistance army perished alongside the enemy. Fortunately, humanity was not destroyed, but the few remaining humans are no longer the sole owners of this land. And now, you will be the only hope for the Ark Base. Children, come with me to rebuild our home. As he spoke, his eyes scanned everyone and he said, now, if you have any questions, you can ask. This game. Is there only 5 of us? I don't understand what you mean by the game, but the base's carrying capacity is limited, so we can only awaken a few of you temporarily. Noah calmly glanced at them and said, "You are the vanguard of this base. Only after accumulating enough energy will we awaken more people, otherwise we will have to close it." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Great God Startles the Goose. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Great God startles the goose. Upon hearing that the NPC was really answering their questions seriously, several people couldn't believe it and looked over. Surprisingly, he was actually answering, and he could still get it right. Isn't that too smart? The surprise on his face didn't disappear, and he even reached out and shook his hand in front of him. Is there only one base within our scope of activities? Lin Ye looked around. If we were confined to only one base, although we could stand up, it seemed that we wouldn't be so happy anymore. Before Noah could answer, the old monster also spoke up. Yes, if we could create such realistic special effects, the server would definitely face a lot of pressure, and the game range wouldn't be too large. Unexpectedly, Noah shook his head and said, "Of course, it's not just in this base. Since you want to build here, of course, you have to go outside to search for supplies. Only with the supplies can you increase the energy of the base." Before they could continue speaking, Noah said, "As the first awakened people, you will have a special benefit. That is me, as the leader, who will personally send you outside to open up a new world." Watching Noah turn around and walk outward, his legs followed with a smile. Are we finally going to leave the plot? I still have a little anticipation in my heart. Each of his movements exuded a sand sculpture aura, causing everyone to shake their heads helplessly. Lin Ye didn't have much anticipation for the plot, so she just thought about whether there was really a bigger world for her to explore with her legs that stood up again. As Noah walked, he explained to them, "Each of you has a smart computer on your wrist that can wake up the interactive screen, where you have your information and tasks." Lin Ye didn't play the game much, so he could only listen to the other person's reminder and quickly open it to see, what does this initial attribute point mean? Why are they all different? Everyone's initial abilities are different, and the initial values of attribute points are naturally different, Noah reminded them, so after upgrading, you need to be cautious in choosing your attribute direction. After all, there is only one chance to choose. Lin Ye instinctively nodded, looking at her numerical value and pondering which direction was more suitable for her. But that's too much difference, isn't it? Leghair listened, but still complained, his numerical value clearly off the charts. The green-haired man heard his complaint and immediately said, "What kind of people are you all? My strength is the highest, twice as much as my intelligence. But how come I have the highest intelligence?" The old monster realized something after saying it. "It seems like I'm going to go to the mage department." A few people originally wanted to compare and study with each other, but Noah has continued to move forward. When he caught up with Noah, he had already stood by a thick iron gate. The mottled rust and thick dust all told them that the door had not been opened for an unknown time. Click. As Noah pressed the door open, the iron door slowly opened. Twinkles of morning light shone through the cracks. Without waiting for everyone to be shocked, a cold wind blew in, and the few of them couldn't help but shiver. Can the temperature be so real? With sighs of emotion, the door slowly opened and the real world of ice and snow outside was presented to them. At that moment, Lin Ye couldn't help but hold her breath. Because it was too real, so real that she felt like she had truly entered the midst of ice and snow. Subconsciously walking out of the door, the snowflakes in the sky slowly drifted onto the palm of the hand. Just as I saw its shape, the snowflakes melted instantly due to the temperature in the palm of the hand. Looking around again, the pristine white snow, the snow particles blown by the cold wind, the abandoned buildings not far away, and even the pristine forest cannot be picked out at all. Are the games you usually play so realistic? Lin Ye couldn't help but ask. How could it be? If it were all so real, that sand sculpture wouldn't be so surprised. The tall man shook his head. Lin Ye followed his gaze and saw that his leg hair had already rushed out, and he was rolling in the snow like a cat. The leg hair must be from the south, right? Seeing his appearance, Lin Ye couldn't help but curl his lips. A few people actually understand, after all, southerners see snow as scenery, while northerners see southerners playing with snow as scenery. Noah, who walked with them, also looked at his leg hair with disdain, wondering if he regretted summoning such a player. Setting aside his gaze, he looked up at the sky and said, 100 years ago, humans used nuclear bombs to eliminate zombies. Although we have eliminated most of the zombies, we have also destroyed our own homes, and radiation still exists in many places to this day. And because of radiation, zombies, animals, and even a fraction of humans are starting to mutate. They are better suited to this world and are becoming increasingly powerful. We humans, if we want to survive here, we must work harder. At this point, I finally looked at the four of them. Well, with the leg hair that had just crawled back, there is no food or supplies in the base anymore. Apart from providing you with safety protection, everything else can only be done by yourself. The weapons in the hall are for you, good luck. He just left like this. They couldn't believe it as Noah returned to the base without looking back. Lin Ye reached out and touched the virtual panel in front of him. I suggest you take another look at the interactive screen. Do you have a task? Why so much? It's not scientific, muttered Jimao as he looked at it. Who's the novice who gave so many tasks? A few people looked at each other with some surprise. You don't have to look at me, I'm a game novice and I don't play games much in my daily life, Lin Ye shook her head directly. She really doesn't understand, and in terms of experience, she obviously doesn't have as much as them. The tall man sighed lightly and said, now it seems that the freedom of this game should be very high. Although tasks have been assigned, it seems like we have to choose where to start executing them ourselves. If that's the case, it means that our current choices will affect the progress and even the direction of the game. He paused for a moment. There's no such exaggeration, game developers are not fools, and we can still let a group of small players decide the direction of the game. Leghair countered incredulously. Lin Ye looked around and even lowered his head to hold a snowball. He weighed it in his hand, feeling no different from in the real world. Before logging into the game, could you imagine that the game would create such a real game for us to play for free? I didn't expect my leg hair to catch a whiff. The old monster glanced at her and said, do you also think he's right? Lin Ye nodded without hesitation and said, since so many tasks are being issued at the same time, isn't it really up to us to determine the priority of the tasks ourselves? And we are also the first batch of people to enter the game. Anything we do now will leave a mark, and even affect later generations. Of course, if this game really brings in more people. The tall man could see that she was still skeptical. We will study these issues in the future, and for now, this is still the most important one. As he spoke, he glanced at everyone and said, since there are only 5 of us now, it can only be a united front for warmth. Let me introduce myself, I am Jinghong. Are you Jinghong? The old monster looked at him in shock, that great god Jinghong. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Mutant Rabbits. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Mutant Rabbits. Without waiting for Jinghong to answer, the chubby green-haired man proudly said, that's right, it's the legendary Jinghong deity. It's not about you, what are you following Stinky Beauty for, said the leg hair disdainfully. The chubby green-haired man snorted coldly, because I am the best partner of the amazing god, the Eastern Journey Saint. Oh, that tank that will always be a blood cow. The old monster even knew him. Looking at their lively conversation, Lin Ye had never heard of anyone, whether it was a great deity or a great sage. My name is Lin Ye, I haven't played any games before, she said, only when a few people looked over, I can tell. Jinghong nodded, even the name is his real name, right? Lin Ye smiled bitterly and nodded. When wearing his helmet, he didn't take it seriously. When he asked for a name, he casually filled in his own name. From the current situation, at least in the short term, there should only be 5 of us, Jinghong said wisely without further questioning. The old monster was still thinking about the task. Since we are already people on a ship, which one should we do first for this task? Lin Ye looked at a few people and could tell that they were all gaming experts, but the current situation is not traditional gaming. You are all experts in the game, but as you can see, it should be different from regular games now. Since the taste is real, the feeling is real, and even the cold is real, then I guess hunger should also be real. If we can't find food before we're too hungry to walk, we'll probably be the first players to starve to death. A few people suddenly realized. Jinghong looked at her in surprise and said, "You're right. Eating now is indeed the most important thing. But where are we going to find food?" That NPC just said, "There's nothing left in the base." The Eastern Journey Saint turned around to look at the empty hall, and Noah's trace had long disappeared. I believe even if Noah is present, it is impossible to provide them with food. Just because there's no one inside the base doesn't mean there's no one outside. Lin Ye frowned. Have you really taken a serious look at the interactive screen? The great sage of the journey to the east turned around to look at the screen and said, there are actually monster details here. What kind of ghost? Edible. If this world is really post-war wasteland, it cannot grow food under nuclear radiation. What can animals eat without eating it? Lin Ye could easily accept this setting. Although it is a mutated animal, there is not much fundamental difference between it and eating insects in the wild. So let's give it a try. The Eastern Journey Saint instinctively looked at Jinghong. Without waiting for him to answer, Lin Ye had already picked up the weapons that NPC had mentioned, with axes and knives. She felt it inconvenient to hold an axe, so she picked up a knife. Although it was a bit old, it was still quite easy to handle in her hand. If you're afraid, you can skip it, he said, glancing at him again. Dong Yu Dashing was taken aback and said, what's the origin of this woman? Mutant creatures, are you not afraid at all? She's right, if you're afraid, you can hide back in the base, Jinghong said rudely, taking a knife and following Lin Ye. Who's afraid? Exclaimed the great sage of the journey to the east as he followed up. If it were in the game, Lin Ye would have believed in their judgment and ability, but now it seems that it is not closely related to the games they have experienced. Finding food here, as well as finding mutated animals, is almost within the scope of wild survival, and even winter wild survival. Following the road where the snow was not yet thick, I walked straight towards the distant forest. Perhaps seeing her resolute and unwavering footsteps, Jinghong followed her without much hesitation. In the monster information, the danger level is given, and the lowest level of activity is at the edge of the forest. As he walked, Jinghong still spoke up, we don't understand the situation here now, don't go too deep into the forest. Lin Ye turned around and gave him a surprised look. The information on that screen is large, diverse, and few people can patiently read it all. But Jinghong saw it in such a short time and even caught the key point. No wonder he can be called a great god. It seems that he still has some abilities. While thinking, Lin Ye nodded and said, judging by the monster's level, you can tell that there must be a mutated animal here that can instantly kill us. I just don't know what their danger level is judged based on, without enjoying the data comparison, only knowing that there is danger, which is too unsettling. Upon hearing these words, Jinghong also glanced at her in surprise, obviously surprised not only by Lin Ye. In this initial encounter, through these details, one can see that the other person is not simple. Quickly, a few people arrived at the edge of the forest. The pure white snow made the few people walking into the forest step by step, and their speed instantly slowed down. Don't use it so realistically, isn't it a decrease in the experience? My leg hair had never seen such heavy snow before, and after excitement passed, only difficulty remained. Mainly because there is snow everywhere, where to find prey. Hibernating early, right? The great sage of the journey to the east rarely stood in line with him. The old monster interrupted him directly, not all animals hibernate, this is a common sense problem. Before the scolded great sage of Journey to the East could even speak, Lin Ye took the conversation and said, "That's right, even with such heavy snow, there are still animals moving around. Look at this trace, it should be left by the rabbit." As soon as they heard this, their eyes lit up and they looked in the direction she pointed, without noticing any difference. "Is it this trace of varying depths?" Jinghong finally asked with some uncertainty. Lin Ye nodded directly and said, "There should be a rabbit passing through here, but the snow is still falling, covering up that obvious mark." Just. Listening to her hesitation, everyone looked over. "How do you feel that this rabbit's volume is not quite right?" She shook her head and said, "Forget it, we'll know what's going on when we see it." Watching Lin Ye continue to walk, Jinghong and the old monster exchanged a glance, both seeing the surprise in each other's eyes. The traces in the forest are not obvious. But because there are no other traces of interference, it is not particularly difficult to find. As the traces became clearer, the eyes of the few people behind Lin Ye became brighter and brighter. Although leg hair is not usually reliable, at this moment he also knows the weight. He whispered in a low voice, "The ability to survive in the wild is really lacking, and we can really find rabbits." And halfway through, he suddenly stood there dumbfounded. "What do you call this?" "A rabbit. Just as I saw it not far away, there was one even bigger than a husky and fatter than a panda, even revealing its fangs and claws. Apart from that face, there was nothing like a rabbit in any place." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Do you call this a rabbit? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Do you call this a rabbit? The mutated gray rabbit was not scared away like an ordinary rabbit when it saw them. Instead, he revealed his sharp teeth to them and let out a somewhat eerie cry. "Humph, even if you show your teeth, you're just a rabbit. I'm afraid you won't succeed. The great sage is now fearless and ignorant, isn't it just a game? His strength is so high that being a blood bull is completely fine." So without much thought, he held up his axe and rushed towards the rabbit. The rabbit saw that they not only did not hide but also attacked it, and their eyes became even more fierce. Lin Ye even saw the shadow of a wolf in its eyes. "I saw my leg hair rushing towards me, and all I saw was the mutated rabbit kicking its hind legs to the ground, accumulating strength and making a diving posture." Her face changed and she said, "Be careful." As he spoke, he also rushed over. Almost simultaneously, the mutated rabbit charged towards his leg hair and grabbed him fiercely with its front paws. Lin Ye was not in a hurry to save the person, so he could only lift his leg and kick his leg hair, causing it to change direction and fall to the side. The rabbit, fanning its claws, did not stop at all. Its thick paws slapped the nearby tree trunk, instantly picking up the bark and wood. The debris scattered and even hit Lin Ye's body. His leg hair almost rushed down and plunged into the snow, stumbling up and wanting to curse. But when he looked up and saw the marks on the tree trunk, he suddenly shivered, even colder than diving into the snow. Breaking the good news, the rabbit looked at Lin Ye with anger and redetermined its goal. Lin Ye did not charge forward, but instead prepared a defensive posture for combat. "Quick, this is not ordinary monster fighting. Let's go together." After a brief surprise, Jinghong also reacted and surrounded with a few people. As a one-to-many, the rabbit seemed to not take them seriously at all, just staring closely at Lin Ye. I don't know if it's the animal's instinct that makes it feel the danger of Lin Ye. The rabbit charged up again, and Lin Ye stared closely at it, finding the best time to swing his knife out. Bang dang. The knife in hand collided with its claws, and the sound of the sharp tool colliding revealed how sharp its claws were. When Lin Ye blocked its blow, Jinghong decisively struck it on the back with a knife. "Can't cut through." Jinghong was startled as he saw that his knife only left a trace on his fur. Stomach is its weakness, I attract its attention, you attack the key." Although it was just an attack, Lin Ye had already noticed the weakness from its movements. During the conversation, the rabbit had already struck again and even pounced on Lin Ye. The husky-sized rabbit pounced like this, and the scene was still very spectacular. The first reaction of most people to such a scene was definitely that their legs were weak. But Lin Ye did not retreat but instead advanced, holding up his knife with both hands to forcefully block its attack. But it kept pushing it backwards until it hit the trunk, causing the snow on the tree to fall one after another. But at this moment, no one had the mood to appreciate such a beautiful scenery. Startled by this, the swan shouted, "Quick, let's go together." The great sage and he were originally partners, and at this time they had a good understanding. The two of them rushed towards it, one left and one right, and stabbed straight into the rabbit's belly. Puff! Jinghong's knife and the great sage's axe almost pierced in at the same time. Lin Ye, who was still holding on, suddenly felt much less pressure. The rabbit that was stabbed did not give up and gave up the Lin Ye in front of him, slapping the great sage directly. Ah! The great sage of Journey to the East let out a scream and flew backwards. Great Saint! Jinghong's face changed. Lin Ye didn't even glance at him and almost simultaneously pulled out his knife and forcefully chopped off half of the rabbit's head. The mutated rabbit, who was just showing off, finally fell in the snow. Seeing that it didn't move, Lin Ye finally breathed a sigh of relief before looking up at the Eastern Journey Saint and saying, "Are you okay?" "It's over, it's over." The great sage sitting in the snow looked dumbfounded. My generation of tanks almost died in the hands of a rabbit. My lifelong reputation has been ruined. Jinghong stopped walking forward and said, "Forget it, he's okay." As he spoke, he looked at Lin Ye and said, "How are you? Did you get hurt?" When he asked this question, he realized that during the battle, he had already forgotten that it was a game and was truly a battle in the real world. Lin Ye shook her head and said, "I'm fine, it's just. I didn't expect that even a one-star mutated animal would be so powerful. This world is even more difficult to survive than we imagine. What a star." The great sage finally finished her EMO and jumped up when she heard her words. Lin Ye pointed to his wrist and said, "After we killed the mutated rabbit, the monster's information has been updated." Not only did it update, but it also indicated the level of danger. Jinghong also reacted and said, "Yes, it wasn't included in the monster details before. So the monsters in this world are not just the ones prompted in the system, it depends on what we encounter next." Lin Ye nodded and said, "It looks like this. But fortunately, we haven't encountered any monsters that are already present in the system, they are all 2 stars and 3 stars. Her leg hair also truly felt the rabbit's attacking power up close. Upon hearing her words, she almost didn't jump up and said, "1 star is like this, 2 stars and 3 stars. How does that make people live? How else can we live? Only if we become stronger, no matter how many stars we have, there's no problem." Jinghong said, glancing at Lin Ye, unsure of what he was thinking. Lin Ye ignored it and walked to the side of the rabbit. After a while, the blood flowing out had frozen, indicating that the temperature was low enough. Isn't there supposed to be equipment dropped to kill monsters in the game? Why isn't there anything? Jinghong also walked over, indeed having nothing but a dead rabbit. He frowned and said, "What kind of setting is this? Is it possible to kill monsters and only get their bodies?" Seeing that they were also unaware, Lin Ye said directly, "We can't smell this bloody smell, which doesn't mean that those animals can't smell it. If you don't want to encounter more powerful monsters, then leave here as soon as possible." As soon as they heard this, their faces changed. The great sage said directly, "Let me carry it. My strength should be the highest." He didn't say anything wrong, even though he was slapped by the rabbit, he could easily lift the rabbit. "It seems that these data are still useful," Jinghong asked as he walked along. "What are you all good at? Perhaps this is the direction of our future development. I have 6 powers, so I should be the highest, right, said the Eastern Journey Saint proudly. I haven't seen anyone else's attribute points yet, but their other points are pitifully low, so naturally I guess this power must be the highest. Sure enough, Jinghong nodded and said, I have higher endurance and speed, both at 6, and my intelligence is also good at 5. My intelligence is only 7, everything else is 2, the old monster said with some disbelief after listening to his words. No wonder you didn't even catch up with the speed of the rabbit just now, Jinghong said without any surprise. Upon hearing these words, the old monster became even more mournful. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Are you an undercover agent? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Are you an undercover agent? Seeing his expression, Lin Ye couldn't help but comfort him. Don't worry, since the game is set up like this, maybe having high intelligence can still be useful. The old monster's eyes lit up after hearing this and looked at Lin Ye. So you're so powerful, what are your initial attribute points? Lin Ye hesitated for a moment, but as he looked at their expectant eyes, they still lit up. Lin Ye level. Level 1 strength. 6 prediction. 6 endurance. 8 intelligence. 5 speed. 7 health. 500. The old monster swallowed his saliva and said, Are you actually an undercover agent placed by the game company in us? Jinghong couldn't believe it and gave her a glance, but in that moment, he was much more than the old monster had thought. Subconsciously, he asked, What do you do in reality? Obviously, in reality, the old monster is just a tech otaku, so everything except intelligence is pitifully low. In reality, the great sage can also be considered a powerful man, and regardless of whether he can fight or not, his muscles are sufficient for year-round fitness. He was not sure about the condition of his leg hair, but he believed it was similar, so he couldn't help but ask this question. After hearing his question, Lin Ye hesitated for a moment before saying, It's just an ordinary person. What is the relationship between this and our initial attributes? Don't misunderstand, I didn't explore your meaning either. Seeing her like a hedgehog in an instant, Jinghong realized that he was asking a bit rashly. I just suspect that this value should be related to abilities in real life. What you're saying seems to make some sense, the old monster nodded. In reality, I can't run 800 meters. I am a short video blogger in reality, but what does it have to do with my predictive ability? Asked Leghair in surprise. Jinghong shook his head and said, This is just a guess. We need to slowly explore the specific reasons. Lin Ye saw that he really didn't have any malicious intentions, so he spoke up and said, I have indeed learned combat skills in real life, and when I was just killing that rabbit, I was able to use my abilities in real life. Can it still be like this? The great sage's eyes lit up. Then should I also find a private tutor to learn some boxing and so on? The old monster rubbed its nose and said, This is not scientific. Without skill limitations, we would be completely free to move in the gaming world. This not only increases the pressure on the server, but the algorithm also needs to be super powerful. At least I haven't heard of any company that can implement it yet. Jinghong glanced at him and said, From entering the game to what we have experienced so far, have you ever experienced anything, or even heard of it? The old monster suddenly stopped talking and looked at the leg hair and the great sage who had been beaten before. How much blood did you lose just now? Fortunately, I lost a bloody skin. The leg hair looked at the eye panel and found that the total value of 500 was 10, which is still acceptable. The great sage, however, looked mournful and said, I dropped 50. This is just a slap, it's too tragic. Judging from his expression, the few of them were really unable to laugh or cry. From their words, Lin Ye seemed to understand that everything in this game seemed unusual. Based on the health points lost by the two individuals, the damage power of this rabbit can be roughly estimated. A few people were still not accustomed to such an environment and stumbled back, finally leaving the forest. They searched for prey to hunt rabbits, which delayed some time. By the time they walked out of the forest, the sun was already clear, giving the air a hint of warmth. If I hadn't known it in the game, I would have suspected running to the northeast wilderness to survive. The great sage carried the rabbit and gasped slightly, still feeling emotional. There aren't such big rabbits in northeast China, Leghair retorted. You haven't been there again, you haven't even seen snow, so you're not qualified to participate in this topic. The great sage of Journey to the East refused to give in. As Lin Ye listened to the two people behind him chattering incessantly, he didn't feel annoyed, but rather found something interesting. It seems that this game is also good. And even she didn't notice, the corners of her mouth slowly curled upwards. When a few people returned to the base, it was already noon. At this point, several people realized that Lin Ye's guess was correct. They not only felt tired but also hungry. After tinkering all morning, I feel really tired and hungry now. Brothers, I found a restaurant next to the control room that should be able to cook. While a few people were resting, my Leghair ran to explore the situation at the base. Seeing them all looking over, he immediately said, "There's also the kitchen. Although there isn't much seasoning, it's definitely enough for cooking." Upon hearing that they had found the restaurant, the few of them suddenly regained their spirits and said, "This game doesn't really require cooking and eating on their own, does it? Otherwise, what should I do if I'm hungry now? Can I bear it hard?" After finishing speaking, my Leghair recommended himself. "My cooking skills are pretty good. If there is really a kitchen, I can make braised rabbit meat for everyone." Lin Ye glanced at the rabbit and said, "This big rabbit, even if it's done all at once, doesn't have such a big pot. What about the remaining meat? Isn't it enough to freeze outside on such a cold day?" The great sage said without hesitation. "You have to think about things according to the logical thinking of this world," Jing Hong interrupted him. "In such a place, if you freeze the rabbit outside, it's almost just for other exotic beasts, and it may even cause us danger." Lin Yi suddenly thought of something. "You can make enough for us to eat, and I can grill the rest into jerky meat, which can be left for at least a week. The 5 of us will basically eat up in a week." Her proposal, of course, was not opposed by others, so she immediately got busy. My Leghair is processing rabbits outside, while others are searching for fuel, preparing to light a fire for Lin Ye. Watching the fire start, Lin Ye thought of the tasks on the screen and said, "It seems that our tasks complement each other. If we can't find food, we will go hungry. If we can't find fuel, we won't be able to cook. If we don't build a campsite, we won't feel secure here." At this moment, Leghair walked out with a mournful expression and said, "You're right. Without fuel, we can't do anything. Although there's a pot in the kitchen, we can't cook." Lin Yi suddenly understood that this was really intended to make them completely self-sufficient. "It's okay, let's set a fire and I'll set up a hanging pot for you." Watching her skillfully draw out another pile of fire from there, and even set up a frame to steadily place the pot of Leghair on top. This series of movements is so smooth that it's really impressive. "I now understand why your initial attributes are so high. In front of you, we are like fools," said Leghair with emotion. The old monster also shook its head and said, "This is definitely not something that can be accomplished with just high intelligence." At this moment, Lin Yi also realized that the reality of this game seemed a bit excessive. She thought she would never have the same experience again, but faced it again. For a moment, she really couldn't distinguish which was real. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Who is the intellectual type? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Who is the intellectual type? Chapter 6 Who is the intellectual type? It's easy to start a fire and roast a rabbit, but when it comes to making it, just starting a bonfire is not that simple. Not to mention mastering the barbecue heat, such a big rabbit is almost no different from grilling a whole lamb. It's not a problem for Lin Ye to start a fire, but when he baked it, he realized that the small game he roasted in the wild during peacetime was not the same. Fortunately, the leg hair is not really bragging, it really has some skills, whether it's rabbit meat soup or roasted rabbits, they are all decent. Soon, the entire base emitted waves of fragrance. Hunger, fragrance, the old monster said while swallowing water, how many surprises are waiting for us in this game? I don't know how many surprises there are, the Eastern Journey Saint shook his head. All I know is that this roasted rabbit must be very delicious. Looking at the skin that has slightly turned golden, it means that it should not be far from being edible. Lin Ye sighed and said, you should be a professional chef, right? Upon hearing her words, the group turned their heads and saw their leg hair adding seasoning to the pot, which was indeed a somewhat professional gesture. Seeing them all looking over, his legs furrowed and he said proudly, I don't dare to be a professional chef, but I have passed the second-level chef certification exam. Unfortunately, there are not all the ingredients here, otherwise it would definitely be better to eat. So in front of the food, even the great sage absolutely bowed to the food and did not refute it again. The stewed rabbit meat with leg hair is ready first, and several players who are so hungry that their stomachs are already roaring one after another are no longer polite. Bowls of fragrant rabbit meat were delivered to their hands. It's so fresh. Lin Ye took a bite and instinctively said it. This way, there is no seasoning at all, and the meat soup with only some salt added is really fragrant and fresh. In such a temperature, having such a bowl of meat soup is really the best reward for one's stomach. Moreover, with such a large mutated rabbit, the meat is not aging at all, but even more tender than the meat eaten in reality, almost melting upon entry, making people almost forget that this is the end of the game. Eating rabbits and listening to a few people chattering, Lin Ye suddenly heard a jingle in her ear. As soon as I looked up, I saw that the other few people were also surprised and looked up. Task prompt sound. Lin Ye immediately responded, and the voice was exactly the same as the voice when he just received the task at the door. Sending lunch to Lord. The great sage of the Eastern Journey exclaimed subconsciously after seeing it. What the hell, does he still want to eat? You say that. It will reduce your favorability. The old monster looked at him helplessly, but it is indeed strange. If an NPC wants to eat, they also need players to deliver food. Anyway, lunch is ready. Made, so give him some, it's much safer than going to fight monsters, Jinghong comforted everyone. Lin Ye nodded and said, it's just that the difference in rewards is a bit big, isn't it? It's not too much difference, is it? His leg hair looked down and said, we gave him lunch. Each reward has 5 experience points. I just fought monsters and only gave him 7 points. Lin Ye looked over unexpectedly upon hearing this and said, are you only at 7 o'clock? This sentence made others realize that although it was a group fight against monsters, the experience was actually different. Can it be the last blow? The old monster asked. Jinghong shook his head directly and said, I have 15 points, more than leg hair, it should be based on contribution. As she looked at Lin Ye, she suddenly understood and said, I have 23 o'clock. Sure enough, although you completed the final blow, the great sage and I also made contributions, but relatively speaking, our contributions were greater than those of leg hair and the old monster, so we gained more experience than them. Upon hearing his analysis, his legs furrowed and his face turned sad. We all fight monsters together. As for how clear we are. You're okay, at least there are 7 points left. Only 1 point. Do we have to wait until the next life to upgrade? Upon hearing his words, Lin Ye suddenly realized something. I remember when we received the task of fighting monsters, the reward instructions we wrote were also 10 points per person. But when it's actually completed, there's no experience assigned according to task details. Does that mean that other tasks are the same? Jinghong immediately understood her meaning and said, Old monster, I believe your intelligence should only be used in the later stage, but you also need to find ways to upgrade in the early stage, otherwise you won't be able to survive in this game. You can go for this lunch task and try to see if it's the same as our guess. The old monster's eyes lit up as soon as he heard it. After looking at a few people, he felt a bit embarrassed and said, "But this prey was captured by you guys, and I didn't put in much effort." Lin Ye patted him directly and said, "What about us? We didn't say it before, but now there are only 5 of us in this world. If we don't unite, we won't be able to survive here. Now we take care of you, maybe when we need an intelligent player, it's your turn to take care of us." This time, almost all of the rabbit's efforts were from Lin Ye. She had said so, and the others had not spoken before. My leg hair directly took rabbit soup, cut the roasted meat and handed it to the old monster, while also punching him. "They're all big men, don't be so pretentious," he said. The old monster finally laughed and turned around with lunch, entering the base. Looking at his back, the great sage shook his head and said, "What kind of intellectual type is there?" Although he's not very intelligent, Lin Ye's intelligence is about the same as him. How could you believe that when you need an intellectual player in the future, he will be even more powerful than Lin Ye? I have to admit that the great sage was really clever once. The old monster didn't expect that this was Lin Ye's words of comfort, and went to deliver lunch to the Lord with an expectant expression on his face. The fact proves that Lin Ye's guess is correct. The task description and the final result are completely different things. When the old monster becomes the main executor of this task, he gains the most experience. Although it was just an experiment, it allowed them to understand some of the task patterns. "Have you really never played a game?" The old monster returned and sat by the fire, looking at her with some surprise. Lin Ye shook her head and said, "I've played it before, but not much." "In your eyes, it should be no different from not having played it before." And knowing what he was puzzled by, he continued, "This guess is not based on game experience, but on analysis of real-life situations. I may have a better memory, and I can easily remember things I've seen once, that's why I came up with this." "Are you bringing your own cheats?" The old monster sighed with emotion before realizing, who is the intellectual type. Why can't you feel the advantage at all? End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Optimal Solutions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Optimal Solutions. A few people ate and drank well, and put the remaining food into the small warehouse next to the restaurant. Although this is not a cold storage, the temperature is relatively lower, and they have roasted the meat to a state close to dried meat. It's definitely not a problem to eat here for a few days. But just as the thing was inserted, a few people heard the prompt sound again. This time, they were all surprised to see a completely different voice than before when the task was assigned. 2 copper coins. Having money is a good thing, but what are 10 points? Didn't they say they worked? Obviously, this game has its own economic system and the base's own point system, Jing Hong thought for a moment. The money can't be spent now, but it should be of great use in the later internal and even public beta. As for the points, if you guessed correctly, it should be linked to the permissions at the base. The higher the points, the higher the permissions. When he said this, everyone suddenly nodded and said, "It seems that we not only need to hurry up and upgrade, but also need to save money in points before the large army arrives, and distance ourselves from them. These are all things in the future. Now that the food has been resolved, what tasks should we complete next?" Lin Ye looked at their solicitation and asked. "The fuel needs to be solved, just cut down the trees." The old monster frowned as he looked at the remaining tasks. "But how can we build this wall? There's no concrete or bricks, and it's in this icy and snowy land. How can we build it? Do we also need to use wood if it's difficult? If we really want to cut down trees and build walls, there are only 5 of us. When will we have to cut down to?" Chimao looked at the 2 tasks and complained, "Playing a holographic game requires running into the game and chopping down trees every day. Isn't that a joke?" Lin Ye stood up and looked at several abandoned buildings not far away. Some had already collapsed by half, but some still maintained their original appearance. There are not many buildings, which cannot be compared to densely populated residential areas in reality, but they are also connected and located directly in front of the base. Actually, there's no need for us to build a new wall ourselves. Suddenly, Jinghong, who had left at some point, walked back. I just took a look around and looked at the situation around a base, Jinghong explained to them. Our task is just to build a wall to protect the base and then proceed with further development. But we don't know how high it is for safety, nor do we know how big it is enough. If it's just safety, we can just set up some fences in front of the base gate as safety. But in this way, the subsequent construction will not be so easy to carry out, so we cannot just focus on the present. Great God, what you said is equivalent to saying nothing. Jimao sighed, you just say it directly. What are you planning to do? He plans to connect those buildings into a circle and then set up a fence in front of the base gate, preferably with a defensive function, Lin Ye continued, looking at Jinghong again. Jinghong smiled and said, that's right, I just went to see those buildings. Although most of them are abandoned, the main body of the buildings is still there. As long as we choose some, use those broken bricks and steel bars, and add some wood to connect them into a circle, it should not be difficult. Wait. His legs listened to his words and suddenly thought of something. With the fence fixed, can we plant land, build houses, or even develop markets? It's very likely, Jinghong nodded, but this should just be something that leans towards life skills. From the current perspective, the combat system should not be bad either. Those of us who are in the closed beta, who sound good, are actually laborers who do everything well and wait for the later ones to come and enjoy it. Lu Mao sighed. Seeing his dejected expression, Lin Ye smiled and said, we are working as coolies, but we also have our advantages. Don't forget to enter early, not only can you save money and points, but you also have an advantage in level and experience compared to them. By the time they enter the game, even if we haven't figured it out, we'll still be familiar with it. That's our advantage. Yi Jia is right, let's listen to her. The great sage said with a wicked tone, since we need to cut down trees whether it's building walls or fuel, should we first cut down trees? Listening to himself inexplicably becoming the Night Sister, Lin Ye suddenly felt a bit overwhelmed with tears and laughter. But after thinking for a moment, he still said, there's no need to say what you do first and then what you do. Since it's a jointly released task, it's okay for us to try either one. Why not give it a try together? Not only do you check the rewards of the task, but you also look at the difficulty of the task and the ratio of rewards, so that you can find the best way to complete the task and how to complete the rewards more effectively. Jinghong looked at her and suddenly laughed, how do I feel like you're not playing games now? I really don't know how to play the game, but my current feeling is. It's really like reality. Instead of slowly exploring the game rules, it's better to face it as real. Anyway, for me, this is another world where I can walk and run. Why do I have to treat it like a game? The fact proved that she had a simpler idea. Although this world is real, who in the real world can cut a tree with just 2 axes, drag a few pieces of wood with just 1 rope, and walk back with the strength of a few people? I didn't think about hunting before, after all, it's a technical thing. When I entered pure physical work, I realized that all the attributes were truly useful. Even an old monster with only 2 points in strength and endurance is much stronger than in reality. Usually, I can't even carry a bucket of water by myself, but here, I can easily walk back to the campsite dragging a piece of wood. Is this really something that humans can do? Of course, compared to the great sage and Lin Ye, I instantly felt inferior again. Although chopping trees may seem like a simple and even somewhat tedious job, the simpler the job, the easier it is to exercise proficiency. In this continuous repetition of movements, Lin Ye gradually became familiar with her body and lost the initial feeling of discomfort. She can clearly feel that her strength, physical strength, and even speed are definitely better than her in reality. Of course, this refers to her before being injured, even at her best, she did not reach such a level. This discovery made her truly happy from the bottom of her heart. I thought I could just stand up and walk, but I never expected to be even stronger than myself before. At that moment, that mood was really hard to describe in words. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Physical Strength. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Physical Strength. Sister Ye, it's okay. If you continue to chop, the old monster will be almost exhausted. Seeing that Lin Ye had no intention of stopping, his leg hair finally couldn't help but scream out. Although she didn't know how she became Yi Jia, Lin Ye gladly accepted this identity and looked up at them. Sure enough, not only the old monster, but also the leg hair is almost exhausted. Don't keep talking about me, you're not doing much better either, the old monster retorted when he heard him say about himself. Although the strength of the leg hair is poor, it is physically stronger than the old monster, so it is not tiring enough to lie down. At least I can still stand up, and you have the ability to take 2 steps. The old monster suddenly became speechless and decided not to hold on anymore. He lay on the ground and said, I can't do it anymore. I really finished all the labor of these 10 years today. While the two were chattering, Lin Ye walked over and instinctively glanced at the interactive screen, frowning and saying, why don't you have long experience points? A few people listened and didn't care to complain anymore, they all looked over. Sure enough, besides increasing points, the experience is still in place. What kind of ghost game is this? Is it difficult? Can only be upgraded by fighting monsters. The old monster let out a scream and lay back. Jinghong shook his head and said, this shouldn't be a system issue. Whether it's chopping trees or building, it belongs to the realm of life players. If the system gives us more points, it means that life players may need to rely on points. What's the use of points? I want to upgrade. I can complete tasks, but after collecting fuel, I still have experience to gain. If it's a bit slow, it's better than not having it. As Jinghong spoke, he saw Lin Ye staring there again, unsure of what he was looking at. You wouldn't have found anything else, would you? Our information block seems to have an extra item, and this stamina value should not have been available before. Lin Ye expressed his doubts in his heart, and mine has already lost 1/3, so yours. Speaking, he looked at the 2 people lying on the ground. All that's left is skin. The old monster naturally knew who she was talking about and answered sadly. Is it because our physical labor requires stamina value, that's why we added it? Lin Ye said somewhat puzzled. And looking at the 2 people lying on the ground, if you 2 lie down again, I'm afraid there will be an extra temperature value. If it doesn't fall, it may freeze to death. The 2 were startled and quickly sat on the ground, standing up to make the others laugh. There's no need to worry so much, Jinghong shook his head and chuckled. It doesn't feel like it's going to be so complicated. I prefer them to incorporate negative values such as fatigue, hunger, and even cold and heat into their stamina. The increase in cold and hunger leads to a faster decrease in stamina. Lin Ye nodded and said, it makes sense. Looking at the old monster again, he smiled and said, is that what's going on? Just give it a try and you'll know. As he spoke, he took out a piece of jerky from his body and said, eat something and see if your stamina will recover faster. It's not a special prop, it's the rabbit they roasted before. The old monster took it over in surprise, what are you doing with it? Got used to it. Lin Ye couldn't say it was because she had suffered from a shortage of supplies before and almost starved to death, so the habit she developed since then was just a game. She actually brought in real habits. Fortunately, the old monster didn't ask any more questions and just started eating. In this gap, Lin Ye looked up and saw a strange look in Jinghong's eyes, as if wanting to see her through. Lin Ye was taken aback for a moment, but then he casually looked away. It was just a bit different from others, just take a look. After just a short while, the old monster exclaimed in surprise, it's really recovering a lot faster. It seems that Jinghong's guess is correct, Lin Ye immediately realized something. Quickly, let's set up a bonfire here, everyone stay warm and rest for a while, and then go back when our stamina recovers. This is common knowledge for wilderness survival, as long as it is not necessary, one will not work with fatigue. But this is a game, they didn't take it seriously before, and only realized it when their stamina was almost depleted. As the fire broke out, Lin Ye spread knowledge about wilderness survival to several otaku. Looking up again, I saw that both the old monster and the leg hair were trembling. Losing warmth is a major enemy of wild survival, and sometimes it is even more dangerous than visible danger. Regardless of the season, this problem can exist. So it is necessary to always pay attention to one's temperature and fatigue, even if it delays some time, it is much stronger than dying on it. The two of them, who had suffered a lot, quickly nodded and crouched by the fire to keep warm. Looking at the movements of the two and then at the others, Lin Ye looked at Jinghong and said, "Your guess should be correct. This stamina value is the damage caused by all negative situations. But on the contrary, if the stamina is high enough, it can resist the side effects. For example, cold and hunger." De Sheng then lowered his head to look at himself and then at the two of his legs. As for a game, is it so realistic? Game developers should be very knowledgeable about wilderness survival, or they really understand survival, so they added these elements. Lin Ye shook his head and said, "So your original gaming experiences shouldn't be too adapted to this game." No one expected that a few gaming experts would not adapt as quickly as a novice, let alone this novice who taught them a lesson. However, with Lin Ye's early warning, the few of them dared not be careless anymore. Whenever their stamina dropped to half, they immediately stopped to rest on the fire. This not only does not waste time, but also because it has not reached the dangerous value, the recovery is much faster than before, and the efficiency is even higher. A few people instantly realized that they had mastered the first skill in the game. Although it was only a small victory, it was enough to make a few people happy, even excited. Cutting down trees is enough to rival the tall trees of the original forest, with a length that can easily stand between two buildings or ruins. In addition, the fixation of those discarded steel bars is still very sturdy. So in an afternoon, several people not only cut down dozens of logs, but also erected a section of the wall. This workload, which was unimaginable in reality, was easily completed here. Looking at the preliminary results completed by the few people, Leghair exclaimed with emotion, if it were in reality, it might not be possible to achieve it for a year. In another year, in reality, you can't even lift a few meters of round wood, not to mention 20.30 meters of wood. The great sage looked at him disdainfully. But while the two were arguing, Lin Ye suddenly felt a hint of something wrong and a sense of danger. Be careful. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Encountering attacks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Encountering attacks. At the moment Lin Ye reminded, a wolf-like dog, but unusually large animal suddenly emerged from the ruins. At this moment, Lin Ye had no time to observe. Instinctively, he kicked his leg hair open, took a step forward, and swung his knife. With a clang sound, the knife in his hand was bounced open, and Lin Ye was also knocked down. Seeing the mutated animal about to pounce on her, Lin Ye rolled and took advantage of the gap it had made, hiding to the side. The sound of the wind caught by the claws sounded in my ears, making me truly feel the long-lost sense of crisis. Half kneeling in the snow, somewhat disheveled, staring fiercely at the other person. At this moment, others also realized and instinctively swallowed their saliva as they looked at the mutated animal that was almost as big as a cow. This is much harder to beat than a rabbit. The great sage had already lost the aura of a blood bowl, but he knew that at this moment his strength could not withstand the opponent's blow. It's staring at me. Lin Ye tentatively moved and noticed that the mutated dog immediately became nervous. Without any hesitation, I'll catch its attention, you guys attack. Jinghong knew that the old monster and leg hair could not be relied upon, leaving only him and the great sage. The knife in his hand tightened and he carefully moved to distance himself from the great sage. "Let's go!" he suddenly shouted when he saw the mutated dog about to pounce at Lin Ye again. At this moment, not only the great sage, but also the other two picked up their weapons and rushed towards the mutant dog, wielding their swords to chop it off. The sharp weapon attacks from different directions make it subconsciously want to avoid. Lin Ye also jumped up and attacked it head-on. Although mutated dogs lack intelligence, they have an instinctive response from wild animals to danger. After just one strike, it had already identified Lin Ye as the most dangerous enemy, so in the moment Lin Ye moved, it left the others behind and launched a frontal attack on Lin Ye. That would require a large mutant dog to pounce on her, and the sense of oppression could be imagined. Lin Ye's movements are solid, but in fact, he had no intention of competing with it. In the moment and rushed over, his body suddenly became short, and he slipped through the gap where it jumped up, even cutting it with a backhand. Almost simultaneously, the weapons of Jinghong and others also reached out to the mutated dog. Ow! With a scream, the mutated dog fell into the snow. Lin Ye glanced around and found that although the mutated dog was injured, it was not fatal. Several wounds can only be considered minor injuries. Subconsciously looking around, only to see a steel bar with a sharp edge found to fix the wood on one side. Without any hesitation, before the mutated dog attacked again, it rushed over and picked up the steel bars. The mutated dog leaped again. The response of the Jinghong group was not slow this time, and they tried their best to stop it from attacking again, but the effect was not significant. Fortunately, by this time Lin Ye had already received the steel bars, and a mutated dog had already pounced in front of him. He didn't even think too much, but instinctively lifted the steel bars and fiercely stabbed them. The mutant dog let out another scream, then its voice became weaker and weaker, and finally collapsed there motionless. Seeing that the mutated dog had finally died, they exchanged a glance and saw the other person's embarrassment. All of a sudden they burst out laughing. "Is leg hair okay this time? These short legs are not as long as mutated dog's legs, so they dare to charge over." The great sage didn't forget to tease him at this moment. "Although I'm short, I've put in a lot of effort," snorted his leg hair coldly. "Besides, even the old monsters are rushing towards me. What else can I be afraid of?" Although somewhat despised, the old monster didn't care at all. "Anyway, I didn't become a foodie this time." At this point, something suddenly came to mind. "Hey, how do I feel like I've made some progress? I've gained more strength than when I encountered a rabbit before." I quickly lowered my head to look at my data, but found that there was no change except for an increase in experience. Lin Ye waved his hand and said, "No need to look. It's not that the data has increased, it's that you have become stronger yourself." "Really?" the old monster asked with a surprised expression on its face. Lin Ye sat up and said, "We are data-driven here. Whether it's strength, physical fitness, or even stamina, we all follow the set standards. But apart from these, your own skills and combat experience have not been incorporated into the data values. And these, along with your own numerical values, are all that ultimately determine your combat ability." Seeing everyone looking over in surprise, Lin Ye smiled and said, "I also figured it out through the battle just now. When killing mutant rabbits before, I could feel that their strength and even speed were indeed much stronger than in reality, but their flexibility was also lacking, and their fighting skills were different. It's like not adapting to this body." Lin Ye hesitated for a moment and came up with this metaphor. Later, he felt a bit ridiculous and shook his head. But in this battle just now, there was no longer any sense of discord as before. My body has become much more flexible, and I can also use my fighting skills. Otherwise, I would never have avoided its first strike. The old monster felt that his brain was really long and white, and he could understand the words, but when connected together, it seemed to be the language of another world. But I caught one key point, which is, I seem to have really become stronger. Does that mean, The old monster looked at her and couldn't help but ask, even if I don't increase my strength and physical points much, I can still become stronger. In theory, it should be like this, Lin Ye nodded, but before he could be happy, he continued, but the attributes of each item determine everyone's basic abilities. Just like the great sage, he doesn't practice anything, as long as he level up, his strength will be greater than yours. I don't know where the limit of this upgrade lies, so I can't determine whether high technology is more useful or high attributes are more useful in the end, so I don't know. Jinghong smiled and said, children make choices, we all need to. Don't forget that the only way we can improve our attribute points is through leveling up, and leveling up relies on experience. So, how does experience come about? Although it was a question, I didn't wait for many people to answer at all. I just pointed to the mutated dog that had already died. The experience gained from killing monsters, and killing monsters can also exercise fighting skills, don't they complement each other? Where are you in this set of dolls? Lin Ye stood up and looked at them, did you get hurt just now? A few people listened and then remembered to lower their heads to check themselves. As a result, both Jinghong and Dashing were scratched by the sharp claws of the mutated dog. The scar was clearly visible to the bones, but the two of them did not feel much pain. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Degrees of Freedom. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Degrees of Freedom. There is a feeling of pain, but if it is severe and can affect the human body's pain, it is reduced. Perhaps this is the protective setting of the system. Of course, these are not things that Lin Ye, a novice, could guess. She just realized that when ordinary people no longer have absolute pain, they will gradually lose their sense of fear. In this way, for game otaku like Old Monster, the most difficult thing is not physical fitness, after all, this attribute point can be improved for him. But the instinctive fear of danger is not so easy to overcome. Now, without the intense pain, it is much easier to overcome it. Due to the emergence of mutated dogs, the physical strength of several individuals sharply decreased. They had to end their construction project ahead of schedule. To sum up, in one afternoon, more than 60 trees were chopped down, and a few people combined to earn over 100 points. By comparing the corresponding contributions again, we can roughly calculate that each tree has its own points, and then dragging them back together, because it is for cooperation reasons, and the contribution points in this area are divided equally. As for task rewards, less than 1/3 of the construction camp tasks were completed, and only 10% of the fuel tasks were completed. The trees we cut back have all been built with walls, of course, this task is progressing faster. Jinghong put away the screen and turned to look at the defensive wall they had built. And the system is also quite user-friendly, at least we have completed the stage of utilizing the waste and debris. As soon as he heard his leg hair, his frustration disappeared and he said, so, we should be able to complete the camp building task in about 3 days. As for the fuel mission, it doesn't seem to be very difficult anymore. After all, chopping trees with a few people is as easy as cutting melons. Seeing them pondering endlessly again, Lin Ye patted the snow on his body and said, if you keep pondering, it's already dark. Seeing her walking towards the mutated dog, the great sage suddenly regained his senses and hurriedly took a step over. How can this physical labor bother Sister Yi? You are the great hero who saved us from water and fire. Watching him swiftly carry the mutated dog that was even bigger than him, he walked back without hesitation. This mutated dog is actually edible, isn't it too hasty? As they walked back, a few people remembered to investigate this thing. 2 stars, we haven't even become familiar with 1 star yet, so we just jumped to the next level. The old monster looked at the data incredulously, no wonder it's so powerful. Cut, no matter how powerful, didn't you get pierced by our night sister? His leg hair said rudely, with a look as if he had killed him. Lin Ye ignored their praise and walked towards the steel bars in his hand, which had just been pulled out of the mutated dog and even had its blood stains. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Didn't you say that the weapons in the game are fixed and even have attributes? Why can you just pick up a steel bar and kill monsters?" When she said this, the noisy two suddenly fell silent and stared blankly at Lin Ye. Previously, I only focused on fighting monsters and didn't notice that Lin Ye used a weapon that was not provided by the NPC to give the mutated dog a final blow. Is this a monster drop? His legs stuttered. The monster is not dead yet, drop a weapon that can kill it first. Jinghong looked at him helplessly. Then he said, "It seems that the degree of freedom in this game is really higher than we imagine. Thinking about our previous actions, although there were tasks, they did not limit us at all. In the task of building a wall, you can build it any way you want, and no one says you can't build it no matter how big you want. Even using ruins can be counted as completing the task. And the battle just now by Lin Ye. Not only can weapons be used, but there are also no prescribed skills in the battle, right?" The others stared at each other with small eyes. "So? Does that mean I can build a weapon that suits me?" Jinghong nodded and said, "In theory, it should be like this. As long as conditions permit, you can just create an assault rifle, which is also possible." Upon hearing this, the old monster immediately cried and said, "I really want to make it, but I also need this condition. This is the background of the wasteland of the apocalypse, not to mention the steel suitable for weapons, but the iron for making knives, right?" Indeed, although this wasteland theme has an extremely high degree of freedom, under certain limitations, it leaves them at a loss. "Forget it, take it slow, there will always be a way." Lin Ye listened to them and realized that she could only rely on this steel bar for the time being. When a few people brought the mutated dog back to the base and didn't even have time to rest, they heard the system's prompt sound again. I received a reminder that my mental strength is insufficient and I need to be forced to take a break offline. The old monster stood there, looking up at the others. When I saw the expressions of the few people, I knew it was him again and let out a deep sigh. This game is too unfriendly to me. His pitiful appearance may seem a bit pitiful, but it's also really funny. So, amidst the laughter of several people, the old monster had to be forced into the rest hall. Although the name is called the lounge, in their understanding it is a safe zone. The rest hall is even larger than the control hall, with countless small circles painted on the open space of the hall. Each circle has a pair of footprints like charging stations, and people can simply stand on top and go offline. Looking at the motionless old monster standing there, Lin Ye's curiosity rose rare. Has he returned to reality like this? According to their instructions, it should be like this. Jinghong looked at her and continued with a smile as she rarely showed such magic. From the simulation of this game, offline should not disappear, which means that although a person has left, their body must stay here. As for this footprint, she shook her head, "Okay, I don't know what it means." Lin Ye curled his lips and said, "Forget it, we'll know later." I also received the prompt, sighed Jimao and walked straight over to stand aside. Looking at this order, Jinghong was a bit puzzled and said, "What exactly is the evaluation of this spiritual power?" "Comprehensive attribute points." The great sage guessed cautiously. As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Lin Ye and said, "Isn't Lin Ye much taller than us again? This spiritual power is invisible and not bad, and Lin Ye doesn't know if she is high or low. However, so far she hasn't received that prompt, which indirectly proves that the great sage's words should be correct. Wait a minute, I have something else to do this morning, so I'll go offline first." After joking with her, the great sage also stood over. "Well, I want to try and see how long my mental strength can last." End of this chapter.